Hi everyone. My name is Ray Chaya, and I lead employee experience and culture at Zurich, Canada. At Zurich, along with the Z Zurich Foundation, we aim to create a global movement to improve mental well-being of young people across Canada and beyond. Investing in the mental well-being of young people saves lives and leads to positive outcomes in many aspects of life. When mental well-being is addressed, individuals are able to realize their full potential, cope with stress, and positively contribute to their communities. We are committed to ensuring meaningful, sustainable change and believe that by partnering together with charitable organizations such as JA Canada, we can help build capacity to better equip charities to scale their work for the long term. On behalf of Zurich Canada, welcome to the Skills for Success webinar series. We hope that you enjoy the speakers and will consider participating in other related JA programs and initiatives.
The term resilience has become more and more commonplace with the onslaught of difficult experiences that we've all faced in the last few years. But what does resilience really mean? If we look up a definition in the Oxford Dictionary, we'll read about being tough in the face of difficulty and the ability to, quote, spring back into shape. To me, this definition sounds like it's more related to machinery than to our human experience. Resilience should not be understood only as the ability to persevere and keep going through difficult times, like the dog in Casey Green's webcomic, sitting in flames and repeating, "This is fine." I think a better definition of resilience for young people to understand is that offered by Dr. Michael Unger, the co-director of Dalhousie University's Resilience Research Center. He writes, "In the context of exposure to significant adversity, resilience is both the capacity of individuals to navigate their way to the psychological, social, cultural, and physical resources that sustain their well-being, and their capacity individually and collectively to negotiate for these resources to be provided in culturally meaningful ways." The first part of his definition outlines the capacity of individuals to navigate their way. And I want to pause there. Resilience is not something that we either inherently have or we don't. We have the capacity, the ability to navigate toward well-being, not all at once, but as part of our journeys. Resilience doesn't always mean being well immediately, or even putting on a brave face. You can't, and maybe you even shouldn't, just spring back from situations that are traumatic or wrong. In many cases, it is normal and healthy to sit with difficult emotions and process how we've been affected or impacted by the significant adversity we face. With this recognition, we can look to find that path forward, to identify those psychological, social, cultural, and physical resources individual to each of us that we need to sustain our well-being. In the second part of Dr. Unger's definition, he describes resilience as having capacity individually and collectively to negotiate for resources to be provided in a culturally meaningful way. From this, I hope you understand that it isn't expected that you already have all of these resources at your disposal, and it isn't up to you alone to find or develop them. The resources that form our coping toolkit are built over time, through our own effort and with others' help. Your advocacy as you collectively negotiate to have your diverse wellness needs met are seen and they are valued. There are some factors within our control that can positively influence our ability and capacity to be resilient. One of these is the way that we care for ourselves physically. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, before addressing any psychological needs, we first need to meet our physiologic needs and have that act as our sturdy base. The physiological needs include adequate sleep, appropriate nutrition, regular movement and physical activity, and avoiding substance use. Young people actually need more sleep than either children or adults because of how quickly their bodies and minds are growing. According to the Canadian Pediatrics Society, to be at their best, youth require 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. Without adequate sleep, it is more difficult to concentrate, feel motivated to accomplish goals, or to respond to stressors and challenges. The same applies for the importance of fueling your body with regular nutrition. For most adolescents, this means having 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks every day, which include a wide variety of food groups and types. For physical activity, doctors recommend teens do an hour of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity, meaning something that gets your heart rate up every day. This can be in the form of going to the gym or participating in sports, or it can be built into your day with active transportation like biking or walking to get around. Finally, though some young people identify substance use as a way to cope with difficult life events, we know that this has both short and long-term negative health implications, and it's not a safe or sustainable tool to have in our resilience toolkit. We also know that a person's sense of self-worth contributes positively to their resilience. There are myriad ways to build a healthy self-image, including through positive self-talk and the intentional practice of gratitude. We can also consider the role of technology and social media. A study in Ontario and Alberta found that 20% of high school students spend 5 or more hours per day on social media. In teens, moderate use of technology has been associated with cognitive and psychosocial benefits, likely related to opportunities online to develop identity and build social connection with like-minded peers. That said, excessive technology has also been linked to negative effects on well-being, including associations with low mood and anxiety, which impair our capacity for resilience. It's easy online to engage in critical comparison and allow it to influence how we perceive and value ourselves. When using social media, it's important to remember not to compare your whole life to someone else's highlight reel, and to take time to engage with our world outside the screen. To end this first part of the resilience webinar, I wanted to emphasize one more message. At the end of your journey after hardship, when you've made your way back to well-being, you will not be the same person that you were before, and you will not be returning to the same place you came from. Though it may be difficult to imagine in the moment, on the other side of that adversity, you will have evolved and grown. Identified strengths in yourself applicable to the next time you face a challenge. Your strengths might include your adaptability in new settings, your bravery in facing the unknown, your ability to process strong emotions like loss or hatred, and those relationships you have fostered with peers and trusted adults. Make an effort to identify your strengths and to help these to inform your self-image, because really, You are remarkable.
If there's one thing that you take away from what I share with you today, I hope it's what I'm about to say. Every single one of you has already experienced adversity, and this has required a great deal of resilience. Regardless of whether you're struggling with your mental health, dealing with stress, or just generally going through a really tough time right now, I'm hoping to show you that you are already resilient, and you have the capacity to continue to build that resilience. I also want to recognize that it doesn't always feel this way, and that can be extremely hard to deal with. I want to start by sharing a few examples of situations that highlight your resilience. You've lived through a global pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted your lives and created stress and adversity in unimaginable ways. You've dealt with school closures, social isolation, economic instability, illness, loss, uncertainty, and fear. The impact has been extremely far-reaching. You've lived through major natural disasters and continue to be impacted by hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, and floods, just to name a few. And these have caused widespread destruction, displacement, and hardship for many. You've been witness to police violence and systemic racism against Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color, which have inspired the Black Lives Matter movement and widespread protests against systemic racism and police brutality. Many of you have been directly impacted by racism and discrimination throughout your own lives. You've seen widespread gender-based discrimination and the rise in anti-trans rhetoric and legislation. You've dealt with economic uncertainty and financial stress. And on top of this, you've navigated your own personal experiences of adversity, stress, and trauma. These are just some examples of the resilience-building events your generation has experienced, with members of your generation experiencing the negative impacts and stress from these events to varying degrees and in varying ways, depending on individual identities, experiences, and intersectionalities. You've responded to these events with a huge amount of courage, advocacy, and resilience, supporting one another and bringing about change. So what is resilience? Resilience is not just inside of us, and it's more than just our capacity to bounce back. One prominent resilience researcher describes resilience as a complicated dance between what we have inside of us and what is done to awaken that. He goes on to explain that in addition to what we have inside of us, resilience also involves the capacity to navigate to the psychological, social, cultural, and physical resources that sustain our well-being, and for these resources to be provided in ways that are contextually and culturally meaningful to us. One thing that's important to understand about resilience is that you can build it, even in very difficult circumstances. Researchers in the field of psychology have identified 9 main factors that influence the development of resilience. These factors include a sense of structure, the presence of consequences, parent-child connections, other strong relationships, a powerful identity, a sense of control, a sense of belonging or culture or life purpose, rights and responsibilities, as well as safety and support. I think it's important to note that during the COVID-19 pandemic, many of these factors were stripped away from you as a result of social distancing, the move to online schooling, reduced opportunities for social connection, fewer opportunities to explore and develop your individual identities, and a lack of control that was experienced in many different ways. Depending on your own particular intersectional circumstances, you are all impacted in different ways. Remembering that can help you understand why you might not be feeling so resilient at the moment, and perhaps will give you hope that as some of these factors re-enter your life, your capacity for resilience will continue to increase. I also want to emphasize that while having a strong connection to parents can be very important, other strong relationships can serve the same function in building resilience. A key active ingredient in building resilience is the relationships you have with others who care about you and who you care about. Research shows that positive connections go a very long way in building resilience. These connections can be with family members, teachers, coaches, therapists, or really any other caring adults. They can be with broader networks of friends, extended family, cultural groups, spiritual groups, and schools, as well as many other types of connections. In other words, resilience is not only about you as an individual, and having less resilience at a certain point in life is definitely not a personal failing or a sign that there is something wrong with you. Research shows that resilience can and must be supported by the people in your lives and can be developed through programs, interventions, and effective social policy. Resilience is built over time and occurs in the interaction between a person and their environment. Finally, I want to talk about the way in which mindfulness and self-compassion can be really effective tools to help build resilience. Mindfulness refers to several types of meditation practice that are based on becoming increasingly aware of your experience without judging it or rejecting it, but also without buying into it or holding on to it. This creates space to be with your experience in a different way than we often are. Mindfulness really just refers to being aware, and this awareness can be very empowering and can help build resilience. In the face of adversity, we can attend and befriend our difficult thoughts and feelings through the use of mindfulness, and in particular, self-compassion. This involves noticing our thoughts and feelings and letting them be there with kindness and gentleness, without pushing them away and without judgment. One way to think of this is to imagine an old friend knocking at your door and you notice that they're really distressed. Instead of slamming the door on them and asking them to go away or judging them, you invite them in, sit down with them, and offer them a cup of tea. We can do something similar with our own experience. Rather than judging it, pushing it away, or beating ourselves up for having it, we can invite it to be there and do so in a kind and gentle way. I'll be the first to admit that this can be really hard to do, but it can become easier the more that you practice it. For most of us, the way that we relate to ourselves is far more harsh and critical than how we relate to people around us. Self-compassion is actively working to change our inner voice, to give ourselves the same care and respect as we regularly give to others. One mindfulness teacher talks about how self-compassion recognizes that it is a part of the human condition to fall down. We might need to get up or get help getting up. This is just what life is like. We are always starting over and needing to pick ourselves back up, and this takes adjustments and mistakes. Research shows that people who are higher in self-compassion are more likely to bounce back because they have a soft landing created by not judging themselves so harshly and being so perfectionistic. A kinder voice can allow you to take risks and get back up when you fall down. This stance of self-compassion can be very helpful in dealing with adversity. Living through adversity can feel really quite claustrophobic, and mindfulness can help create space around that pain and can help regulate the brain and quiet the nervous system. Mindfulness and self-compassion are important tools that can foster resilience. These are learned skills that we develop over time through education and definitely through practice. Before I wrap up, I want to emphasize that you are already resilient and you have the capacity to continue building that resilience. Resilience is not just about pushing through the adversity that life throws at you. It is about falling down, but also about getting back up again. Sometimes this feels like an insurmountable task, but with the support of others and with your own self-compassion, you will get there in time.